You're listening to the Intentional Parents Podcast, brought to you by Intentional. Intentional is all about spiritual formation in the family. We desire to bring biblical hope and practical help. Enjoy this week's conversation. Welcome back to the Intentional Parents Podcast. We are all here today, and we're going to cover a wonderful topic. The topic is, well, wonderful is maybe a strong word, but complaining. We're going to talk about complaining.
We're going to cover a convicting topic.
Sure. That's a better way to say it. And thank you, everybody, for rating and subscribing. If you haven't had a chance to do that again, please just subscribe, rate, leave a comment. That's so helpful. I didn't realize how many people were actually responding on Spotify and actually rating over there. So if you listen on Spotify, please do. And Spotify is kind of cool because you can't actually rate something unless you've listened to a certain amount of it. So it's almost like it makes you listen to it. So if you are a true listener, it's really helpful if you even can rate or subscribe there. And for everybody on YouTube, thanks for watching. We're in our house today. We're hanging out, and we're almost in summer. And I feel like this is a great time to talk about the topic of complaining, because for many of us, we are about to change the rhythm of everything, and we're going to be sitting in our homes with our children for days on end, which is going to be wonderful.
Unless you homeschool and nothing changes.
I feel like, the homeschool does help. And then even, there's fun things happening summer, there's vacations, there's trips, there's all these sorts of things. But we all, even in our team, we can all struggle with complaining. So I'll just open up the topic, complaining. Before we do, let me just think, is there anything new in our lives that we need to share? Anything that has come up? There's nothing right now. I think we just need to talk about complaining.
Oh, I have a funny story to tell you.
Have you told me yet?
No.
Okay.
So I always, after we record episodes, I forget what we talk about.
Yeah, we're married. Did you remember that? Did you know? So we usually talk, but I guess we don't. Yeah. I guess not.
Well, no. So I will run into people and they'll say, I listened to the latest episode. It was so good. And I'll have to say, great. What was it about?
It's hard to keep track. Yeah.
But I ran into somebody yesterday when I was picking up girls from co-op, and she said, I listened to the latest episode and we got a trampoline too. And my husband said the same thing. It was Celeste.
Oh, yeah.
And Mike. Hi, Celeste and Mike. He had the same, I don't want a trampoline.
Yeah, because he's
it's
a smart
an eyesore. It's so ugly.
He's a smart guy.
Put it off
Mike,
for a long
I
time.
love you. Yes.
They got one
because
too.
He's a very intelligent young man. He's put together. I mean, it's also been really fun because I am truly a kid at heart, I think, in a lot of ways. So I jump with them often, and I cannot tell you can really launch a child with the body weight ratios of a full-grown man to a 6-year-old kid. You can get those kids flying.
Remember when we grew up and there weren't nets around trampolines?
Yeah. That's most of our kids. I remember getting flung off of trampolines.
Yes,
you guys
me too.
Yeah. I sprained an ankle on a trampoline.
I remember falling in between the springs and the trampoline and getting my legs stuck.
Yeah, I feel like this episode's brought to you by any trampoline. So so I'm glad we're talking about this. Well, to any parent that decides to do that, good on you. I don't know. Mm-hmm. I mean, I still feel mixed about it, but it's been a great gift for our kids jumping. Anyway, let's talk about complaining. And I want to hand this over to the master of ceremonies. Phil, I want you to I'm just kidding. Well, we've joked on the podcast before about this, and you are not only humble, but you're self-aware, especially around this topic. And I think you have a great perspective. And you also are honest about the fact that it's not like this easy road for you. So anyway, I am teasing.
It's easy for me to talk about grumbling because I'm so good at it. But before I do, I have a trampoline story. I just realized listening to you guys talk, because we never had a trampoline, but everybody, it's like if you don't have a truck, you need a friend who has a truck.
Yes.
So if you don't have a trampoline, you want somebody who does. So my friend Craig Sturgis, I used to go to his house to do the trampoline. I also almost killed myself.
When was this?
This was when I was a kid, maybe middle school. So, but here's what I was just thinking. That guy who could have killed me on his trampoline is the guy who shared Jesus with me and helped get me saved years later.
Really?
So you just never know.
Oh, that's where I heard that name.
So we should have had you guys buy us the trampoline because there's such a heritage
there you
of
go.
the trampoline.
Yeah. We'll expect a full reimbursement by the end of the week. Yeah.
And then the other thought I had when you were talking about summer's coming and the kids are going to be home and it's a change, I was thinking of Diane. Maybe you should tell the story of Germany the difference between your mom's attitude versus Anita Jocelyn's attitude.
Yeah. So my best friend, Caroline Jocelyn, was British, and they lived on the other side of the village from us, and we went to the same international school.
And this is
when you were in Germany.
I was living in Germany. My dad was a nuclear engineer, so we were there for his job and career for a little over 4 years, and got to go to this amazing school, which Frankfurt International School was K through 12, and just everybody together. It was small at the time. But my best friend, Caroline, her mom was just this tender. Oh, she was also very elegant. She drove a kind of a foresty, emeraldy green Jaguar.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
I mean, just amazing.
I know what you're talking
And
about.
then she smoked, because back in the day, in the 70s, that was actually really common.
Yeah.
Very European thing to do. And she would put it so that her fingers wouldn't get stained from nicotine, because she was this classy lady. She would put it in one of those.
Those
little-
extenders. It's almost like,
I just remember thinking, I want to smoke just to be elegant.
Didn't she have a scarf too
Like
when she had the
Anita.
top? It was a convertible, right?
Yes, and she
She had a
would
scarf
do a
on,
silk scarf. She was
Total-
so classy.
very iconic.
Total
But-
60s cool.
Yeah.
But so there was a bus stop at my house. And then if I had made arrangements, I was going to go to Caroline's after school, I'd ride to the next bus stop with her. And we'd get off the bus, and inevitably Mrs. Jocelyn or Anita would have gone to a bakery and bought a big, beautiful cake and have tea and a tea cozy. I mean, like celebrating us coming home from school. So welcoming.
Wow.
But then I remember right before school was about ready to start after the summer, and I'd spent most of the summer at their house, it seemed like. She was actually weeping one day, crying just quietly, nostalgically, not like a basket case or anything, just recognizing that we were going to all be going back to school, and she was going to miss us so much when we were in school. Just the week before, I heard my mother on the phone complaining about my mom loved order, and she was an amazing homemaker and never bored at home. So poor mom, you're there in heaven next to Jesus. Oh, I feel like I complain about her too often. But she was on the phone complaining to another mom about how she couldn't wait for school to start because
And you remember
the kids were driving her crazy. And just the difference between my mom's feeling, which now I understand very thoroughly, thoroughly understand, and Anita's actually mourning that we were going to be leaving because she was going to miss us. So that's
What
the
a
story that Phil
difference.
talks about.
What a difference.
That's perspective.
Totally.
And I think that's what gets us messed up. I will speak for myself. When I have a selfish perspective versus a proper perspective. So grumbling, it's easy for me to talk about. I preach sermons on it, So the joke is, prove yourselves to be doers of the word, not just hearers who delude themselves, it says in James, right? So I could preach sermons on it, living it out, that's another thing. So and you guys know, because having grown up in the Bay Area back when it wasn't so incredibly expensive and overrun, I lived there till I was 41 years old. You're 25 minutes from the beach, Silicon Valley, 40 minutes from San Francisco. In fact, 4 years we lived 1 mile from the beach over by the Santa Cruz area. And so you grow up in that, and pretty much 70 degrees, sunshine, beautiful weather. And when I lived there, I didn't think anything of it. Just,
it was just your life.
Yeah. And then God did call us to move to Portland, where it was tons and tons of rain and gray. And I very quickly started grumbling and complaining. And for me, it became a spiritual issue because I couldn't stop grumbling. And then I had desire to move back, but I wasn't being led to move back. And so there's some deeper things going on. So I've had to wrestle with this personally. And also, scripturally in a spirit, it became a spiritual issue for me. And I think grumbling can become a spiritual issue. And I think you have to say it depends on what it is that you're grumbling about. Is it, like our parents used to say, quit whining or I'll give you something to whine about. Like, it's like if you're whining about some little thing.
Hold on, the quit whining. Okay, so
quit whining or I'll give you something to whine about.
Don't lose your spot, but we were watching some Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. Oh, Kindergarten Cop. And there's this little phrase where he goes, and I don't do a great accent, but I will do my best. But he's literally like talking to all the kids. They're in a classroom and he goes, stop whining. And so our kids, so the other day, this is not a joke. Birdie was whining about something, and Sloan goes, "Stop whining! Stop whining!" I was like, "This is the best." I love.
So we were driving to Sisters, and I stopped at the Chevron station to get gas, and there's all these funky plaques around there. One of them says there will be a $5 charge for whining.
Oh yeah,
and I wrote it down. I go, "That's really good."
Yeah.
Find me. And by the way, I'll get to that. I'm going to be fine. All right. So a couple scriptures.
Yes.
I just, to me, that's why I love the Bible. The Bible has a lot to say about grumbling.
Yes.
Complaining, and it has a lot to say about gratitude and a grateful spirit, because I think it's gratitude or grumbling.
Mm-hmm.
They both start with the G, a little alliteration there.
Yes.
But so first of all, one that I memorized a long time ago, Philippians 2:14-15. This is really a command. Do all things, as a follower of Jesus, do all things without grumbling or disputing. Here's why: so that you may prove yourselves to be blameless and innocent children of God, above reproach in the midst of a crooked and perverse generation, among whom you appear as lights in the world. And then it goes on, holding fast the word of life, or holding forth the word of life. So in other words, like we're testimonies to the world of how Christ has changed our lives. And so when I, as a Christian, am going around, I hate today. Like, I'm not going to be even non-Christian going to say, I don't know what's wrong with that guy, but I'm out of here, man.
Yes.
And so I think that there's a reason that we're representing Jesus, the light of the world. So that's Philippians 2. And way back in the Old Testament, is where you really get a glimpse of how we all can be. So God's people, they're in Egypt.
Oh yes, great.
They're under slavery.
Mm-hmm.
They're being mistreated. The leaders are being, whipped.
Mm-hmm.
Pharaoh says, "Kill all the male children, all the male babies, because the Israelites are, multiplying too fast. They're going to outnumber us, and so let's kill all the male children," which is horrible. They're living under this. And then they start complaining, and he says, "Okay, now you got to go get your own straw, but keep making as many bricks." So they're under this bondage, and of course, God delivers them. He calls Moses to go. He leads them out, and they plunder the Egyptians. They give them gold and silver and goods, and they're carrying all this wealth out of Egypt. Then they get to the Red Sea, and Pharaoh decides to, hey, I'm not going to let them go. And so they think they're going to get killed. God miraculously parts the Red Sea. Okay, so think about that. They're watching this. Their children are watching this. They go through on dry ground, and the Egyptian army comes and gets completely wiped out, and they literally see the glory of God. Then they're out in the wilderness, and within a very short matter of time, they start complaining what they missed about Egypt. And I just feel like that's human nature. So we forget so quickly the blessings of the past. I was listening to John Mark's video this last weekend when we were at the 20th anniversary celebration of the church we planted together, and he's talking about remembering, just getting all nostalgic about the past isn't necessarily healthy, but one of the most proclaimed commands in the Bible is to remember.
Yes.
So they forgot. Okay,
Yes.
so now we get to, I'm setting this up to Exodus 16. So now you've got an entire, in the millions, congregation of Israelites, and they want to go back to Egypt. So quickly, you think, how you look at it, how could you do that? Like, you saw the Red Sea part,
And now you want to
So
go
it
back,
says the whole congregation of the sons of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. Would that we died by the Lord's hand in Egypt when we sat by the pots of meat, when we ate bread to the full. They start remembering this spicy food. Now all we have is this manna. Instead of saying,
They miss
gosh,
tacos, baby. They
we're
miss
not,
the
we're not
tacos.
starving. God's feeding us. And it says in Numbers that they're saying, we remember the fish we used to eat free in Egypt, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic. They're saying, we're missing spicy food.
Yeah.
And we've got this honey, tastes like wafers with honey, manna.
Yeah.
But every day God's providing for their needs. And then God says, I'm going to rain bread from heaven for you, and you go out and gather it every day, that I may test you whether or not you're going to walk in my instructions. So I feel like sometimes God's always testing us, but not testing us in anger, saying, will you trust me? Will you trust me? And will you walk with me? And then on the 6th day, he gave them enough for 2 days, and they keep grumbling. And it says here, God hears your grumblings against the Lord, against Yahweh. Moses is saying this. What are we that you grumble against us? The Lord hears your grumblings, which you grumble against him. Your grumblings are not against us, but against the Lord. And so I think that what I had to wrestle with personally, as I started complaining about the rain, the reality is I would prefer to live in the sun. And now I'm in Bend, living in the sun. But ultimately, I had to wrestle with, is the Lord taking care of me? Yes. Did he call me here? Yes. And then forgetting so quickly the privilege that Diane and I had of planting this church, which it was a revival that God wanted to do. We got to be part of it, and all the many blessings. And so I think for me, grumbling can be a perspective. Yeah. Because I start thinking about what I don't have instead of what I do have, what I don't want to do instead of what I get to do. And, and I think for me, it becomes a spiritual issue because I have to decide if I'm going to live for myself or for the Lord. Yes. And isn't that what Jesus really is asking for us to surrender all? If anyone man wants to come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross and follow me. And then he leads us into things that we couldn't even see would be a blessing. And to be used by God is like the biggest blessing of all. So I got a couple more verses. I'm almost done. 2 Corinthians 5. Jesus died for all, that they who live should no longer live for themselves, but for him who died and rose again on their behalf. And then I was thinking of Paul in Philippians, where he's talking about Timothy. Timothy was like a son to him. So we're going to talk about parenting here. We're going to get to how this affects the family. So Paul wasn't married, so he didn't have any, biological children that we know of. Some people think maybe he was married, but he's single when he's writing all the New Testament. But Timothy, it literally says, is like my child in the faith. So he's bragging about him to the Philippians, and he says, I have no one else of kindred spirit who will genuinely be concerned for your welfare. Here's why. For they all seek after their own interests, not those of Christ Jesus. And so he served with me in the furtherance of the gospel like a child serving his father. And so I think that, I was grumbling and complaining about the rain of Portland while I was getting to serve the Lord. Sure. He didn't need me. God doesn't need me. But he's letting me partner with him, and I'm traveling with Luis Palau and seeing thousands of people get saved. And I'm going home to Portland. It's gonna rain, Move to Portland if your favorite color is gray, and all. And so Diane got so tired of this, and she said, I'll let her talk about it. She got so tired of it, but because for me, although it was a real thing that maybe I would have chosen to live in a different place, or in my soul, I knew this is where I'm called to be. In fact, the church we got to plant, I don't think God could have used us the same way probably any place else. We wouldn't have been as effective. He put us in a place because he puts us where he can best use us. I like to say, we're soldiers in the army. He's the general. Sure. He deploys his forces exactly as he knows how to. So, and then we moved over to Bend, and I go through the first winter, and I say to Elizabeth, it is so stinking cold here. And Diane said, if you start complaining about the cold, I am going to kill you. And so because I think I'm getting better at catching it quicker. Yes. So I remembered this funny thing. There'll be a $5 charge for grumbling. Well, back in my rock band days, I played in a rock band for 9 years before I came to Christ. And so musicians are notorious for being babies, egotistical. You're always up front, signing autographs. Everybody thinks you're wonderful. Yep. And then, whining, because you're all self-centered. And we had two guys in our band that were incredibly self-centered, bad attitudes. And so the guy that managed our band, he said, he was from Arkansas. He goes, I'm going to start fining you $20 for, disobedience. And so we did. We fined guys $20. And so we came up with this thing like, let's start fining Phil if he complains about the cold. And so So Scarlett and I were talking about it. I go, that's actually a really good idea. So what are we going to call the fund? And I said, well, because Diane said she's going to kill me, let's call it Phil's Funeral Fund. So we have Phil's Funeral Fund, but there's no deposits in it yet.
Really?
Well, it's helping me actually. Hey, if I start complaining, it's going to cost me.
What's the price tag? How much?
Well, it has to be at least back $20 back then was like $100. So I don't know. I think it should be like $50. Like,
wow.
But there's nothing in it yet.
It has to hurt.
Yeah. So there you go.
Wow.
That's kind of my perspective. I'm kind of a black and white person. So I do go to, for me, it becomes a sin issue because I know, in 1 Thessalonians 5, it says, rejoice evermore, pray without ceasing, in everything give thanks. Some things are hard to give thanks for.
Sure.
Horrible things happen.
Yeah.
Grieving things happen. But in it, you can thank God that he's with me in it. This thing is horrible, but I thank you, God, that I'm not alone. So I think that in Psalm 136, give thanks to the Lord for he is good. It's all over the Bible. So this gratitude changes your perspective. And I think your Anita Joslin's perspective was, I get this time with my daughter and her best friend. Your mom was thinking about her neat house and, how she could have it neater, and now she's with the Lord in his house, so.
You are enjoying content brought to you by Intentional, a crowd-funded non-profit that desires to help families and marriages all around the world in the area of discipleship and spiritual formation. This offering is completely free thanks to the generosity of our growing community of legacy builders. Legacy Builders is a group of people from all over the world that gives monthly to fuel this dream that we have in our hearts of seeing discipleship to Jesus in the family become a way of life. A monthly gift of $5, $10, or even $30 can continue to fuel this ministry forward. Our dream is to invite people like you to join and partner with us at a financial level and to see this work integrated into families. So as you listen to this podcast, would you prayerfully consider joining us? Would you allow the Spirit to lead you, even if it's just a few dollars a month? Thank you so much, and may the Spirit of Jesus give you wisdom, clarity, and joy as you pray about joining us. If you want to join today, go to intentionalparents.org and click on Give.
So I'd be curious, Diane, he was saying that affected you. So what was going on with you? Because you said, like you might complain, but it's different for you, right? Yeah. But in that time, Phil, thank you, Master of Ceremonies. Yes. Great job walking us through.
I went a little long.
Even a theology of it. I love
I have a lot to say about it.
This is your next book.
The
art of complaining. Everyone's coming out with the art of something, the art of complaining. No, but I mean, like, how was that affect you? You were implying, but tell me a little bit about that for a second. It was affecting you. What was that like for you? And the reason I'm asking is because there's people married, right? And I think maybe it might be good to hear what that's like for a spouse of the other one that's complaining, or that maybe kind of lives in that space, what it might feel like for the other person.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've had words over this.
Oh, yeah.
Quite a great deal.
Yeah.
Me complaining about Phil complaining. But I have learned a couple of things. One is Phil is an external processor. So he has a genuine need to be able to say things out loud and to talk with somebody and bounce things off of them. I am an internal processor. So I rarely want to talk about something until I've spent lots of time internally processing. And if I do skip internal processing and go right to external, it feels toxic to me. It just, for me, it makes me feel worse. So there's part of it is a difference. I think that Phil does have a need to talk about things that are hard. And I don't have that need. And so at least I don't have that felt need. So I think that has created some misunderstanding of the years. But then to go on for years and years and years of going out on our morning prayer walk and hearing more complaining complaining about the rain. I mean, it really rains a lot in Portland.
It really
It's
does.
Really
Yeah.
true. And
It
it's
is true.
It's this gray drizzle, and anybody prone towards sadness or depression,
Seasonal depression. Yeah.
it's very.
Mhm.
I mean, it's a very real thing. So it's not
Mhm.
like just stop complaining.
Sure.
You know, and it can be for weeks on end.
Oh,
So for me, when Phil would be complaining about it, I would still be struggling internally with energy, low energy. And so maybe I didn't feel depressed, but I don't think anybody gets through a Portland winter and spring without at least feeling really tired of it.
Yes.
So for me, sometimes his complaining just felt like he was putting a burden on my back. Like not only was I having to struggle through it, but I was also having to carry his burden. So
Oh, double the
I
load.
mean, that's how it
Yeah.
is when you are living with somebody, right?
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah.
And doing life with somebody, you're affected in good ways and in bad ways. I mean, Phil's generally this very upbeat, cheerful, energetic person. So I benefit from that and maybe lean on that. And so when he wasn't, you know, but I honestly think I grumble and complain, but I do it inside. And don't always recognize that I'm grumbling and complaining. I tend to just go quiet and mopey.
So when you this is helpful because you're highlighting a whole other way of complaining, right?
A
Like because
different
there's
way.
different ways.
Yeah.
So yours is more external,
Yeah.
and everybody kind of knows it because if
Yeah.
it's an external
Oh, yeah.
thing.
And he's a big,
yeah.
big
And Phil,
person.
I mean, you have a pretty small personality. You're not a very,
Yeah.
you don't take the air out of the room. You know, you're lovely. But at the same time, I know that the difference, Elizabeth, I've been offended by this. I'm sure Diana said something to you to this effect of like, you're too big of a personality to just stay at home, like, and work from home. You just you need to be out and shit. And it's not like I don't love you. It's like, it's just a recognition. Like I'm not a passive, chill person. I'm also an external processor. So I understand, but the internal part, I want to know what that's like for you. And you said internal, like, mopey, but is it almost like, self pity like that?
Oh yeah.
Or is that
definitely,
or
that's definitely
is that a
thing for
part
me.
of it? I don't mean like
Yeah.
to highlight self pity as a difference, but is it connected to that complaining? Like I'm complaining and then I feel bad about what's happening and then I feel sad about it. Yeah, tell me more about
So
it.
a little bit of that. I mean, I definitely am an expert in self pity, and not an expert at noticing it. You know, it takes me a little while. It creeps up on me and think, oh gosh, I've gone there again. But I think for me, maybe because, and so this is a different perspective. Our home was pretty adamant that the kids at least were not supposed to complain.
Yeah, you're talking about your kids. You're like Elizabeth, John Mark.
No, I mean the home I grew up in.
Okay.
It was a no complaining home.
Mhm.
But and that term that you used, I don't know if your parents ever would have said something
Quit whining,
that harsh.
or
But I heard it a lot.
Oh,
Quit
no, my
whining
parents
or
said it.
quit complaining, or I'll give you something to complain about, which was ironic because my mother was an external processor and she did plenty of complaining. But I think because I didn't know, and I still struggle to process negative emotions, you end up complaining inside and it ends up leaking out in other ways. Like I'll get real teary over silly things that are not actually the thing. And I think those are indicators for me that there's something going on inside of me. So whereas Phil goes to a black and white, this is a spiritual issue, a sin issue. I think it is a spiritual issue. Totally think it is a spiritual issue. But I go to like Psalms 61 verse 5. And his cry to me is how I feel relief, where David is saying, is it David? Yeah. David is saying, yes, my soul find rest in God. My hope comes from him. Truly he is my rock and my salvation. He's my fortress. I will not be shaken. In the verse 8, trust in him at all times, you people. Pour out your hearts to him, for God is our refuge. So I'm not prone to pouring my heart out to other people every once in a while. But what I need is to recognize something's going on inside of me and I'm unhappy on the inside. It's okay for me to feel those feelings. It's important for me to recognize them and then to take them to Jesus and pour out. I don't know what this is, Lord, but I am feeling whatever. I often don't even have words for what I'm feeling, but to pour out my heart to him, for God is our refuge. For me, to take Phil's way of recognizing this is sin in my life and lack of gratitude is completely ineffective. What's effective for me is to be able to say there's something going on that I need to be aware of. And I need to pour out my heart to God. Yeah. And then I feel like he explains me to myself.
Sure.
And it's out of such loving compassion. So I tear up now. It feels like it's not a scolding as much as, oh, Diane, I love you and it's I know
invitation,
you.
Yeah.
And this is what's happening. So and to me, that's where freedom and joy comes from. So I think if you're listening and you're feeling like you're like Phil, you probably need to follow Phil's path. But you may be a person who's never allowed yourself to complain. Phil will say all the time that I never complained when I was raising the kids. But I know that inside there were times when I stood at the kitchen window feeling like bereft, feeling so lonely, and then feeling guilty that I felt lonely or feeling bored by my own children. Like when my greatest desire was to be a mom. So some of you need to learn to process things outside with Jesus and to get things out of you without condemnation. So I get teary about it because I think, not because of sadness, but because he is so tender.
He is.
He's so radically merciful.
Yes.
And it's important for you sometimes, for us sometimes, to be able to go to him and just say, this is just hard. And I'm not up for this job. I don't have enough.
Yeah.
And then to watch him undertake for you is
helpful.
Is such a faith strengthening thing.
We want to invite you to the Intentional Motherhood Retreat 2024. Last year, over 600 mothers gathered together to learn, to worship, both to encourage and to be encouraged. The Father spoke and the Spirit moved and Jesus healed. And it was so incredible that we cannot wait to do it again. We want to invite you October 3rd through 5th here in Bend, Oregon, where we live. We know that the journey of motherhood is both beautiful and it is hard. It is both life-giving and exhausting at times. And we just want to create space for the Spirit to refresh you in your journey. We're going to lean into how motherhood so gently and beautifully leads us in the way of spiritual formation. We're going to talk about how we need each other on the journey. We're going to talk about how our connection with God ultimately impacts the connection that we have with our kids. This retreat is both for mothers who desire to be mothers someday, all the way to grandmothers, and anywhere in between, because the truth is we all need each other. We need to learn from each other, and we need to be together. It was Dallas Willard who said, if you don't come apart for a while, you will come apart in a while. And that is especially true for us mothers. So we just invite you to come away with us. Let's see what the Spirit wants to do, and we can't wait to see you.
Yeah. Mama Sita, you haven't said much on this episode.
Not yet.
I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. Just an observation from kind of what you had both just said, Phil and Diane, is to think through, some complaining is for very real reasons. Like life's just hard sometimes. Yeah. And then some of it is perspective. Right. Like as an example, weather, arguably not the end of the world. It's annoying, right? But it's not much more than annoying. It's, it's frustrating, but at the end of the day, it's not like life, like you had said, it was the perspective. And then once the perspective changed, like, wow, I mean, it's just like weather. There are other things and why I'm saying this is because some might be listening and going like, why are you so upset about the weather? I'm having this tragedy over here and my life is falling apart. And I would say we've all had those moments too, but we're kind of talking about not just those moments that are really hard, but those moments as well that kind of catch up to us on that mundane daily way. It's like a pattern of thinking. Starts with the weather, but man, does it go so much further.
Well, and I do need to say, Phil has had really good health always, but then a few years ago, as happens often to men when they're tall and they get older, an old basketball injury caused him to need a complete knee replacement.
I'll remember this forever. Yes.
Oh, and my gosh, that's brutal.
I know.
That's brutal. And
I was over at the house that day.
Usually
It was
like
gnarly.
health stuff, probably would have been a good nurse.
You would have, yeah.
But I mean, I was even like just appalled at how
hard it was.
How
So
hard
bad.
it was. He did not complain one time. Not once. Never.
But give him a rainy day, and my goodness.
I know.
Wow. I actually do remember that. Like you're just laying in bed with your leg up real high. And
ice machine.
like,
Ice machine going.
How you doing? He's like, I'm doing, I mean, it hurts, but I'm okay. Like just, I'm kind of laying here. I can't really watch anything so I'm just hanging out and thinking.
But it's raining outside.
Like you can't even move. Yeah, I remember that. That was that's a really great point. Well, honey, what are your thoughts on some of this or how you complain?
Well, just to what you were saying, you and I talk about this a lot, that we all suffer this side of heaven. Like it's a reality, this side of heaven. And a lot of us suffer circumstantially, like in our circumstances, in our relationships, what we might say is like true suffering. But a lot of people, and I think everybody at some point, we suffered because of our perspective. Both are suffering. Both feel just as hard.
You're taking my point, but
Oh,
go
I'm
on
sorry.
it. No, you're not taking
I'm
it.
sorry.
I'll elaborate on it.
It just came to mind when you said that. And I think, it seems to be a lot of what we're talking about even now in this conversation is some of the perspective type suffering, which I think is almost easier complaining to pull yourself back from with God, than the deeper wrestles when you have to wrestle with God of why are you allowing these things to happen, or did you allow them, or did but I think a lot of what we're talking about is the just very everyday circumstances and perspectives of life. And I've been so convicted of this, even just this past week, of just, we've been in a really busy season, which is kind of always, but we've added a few, things.
Yeah, we're going to die.
at the
We'll
same
just die
time.
and then we'll be not busy.
Oh my
That's
gosh,
how that
you
works.
people who have kids all of your kids are in sports and in multiple sports.
I can't even think about
I
it.
don't know how you do it.
Yeah.
It was
They
just that we
don't.
added theater 2 days a week and soccer 3 days a week. And I
And
feel
this is
like
just
I'm
for
going to
2 different
die.
kids. Yeah. Yeah.
But for me, when I get into that like grumbling spirit, it comes out 2 ways. It comes out as irritability at the people around me because
I'm shocked by this.
I
Tell me
know.
more.
I know.
Tell me, I didn't know that.
And it's all of the work that they're creating for me that must be the problem. And then the sneakier one that I'm usually slower to catch is when I start judging the people, especially the people that are closest to me. Don't laugh.
Why
Just let me get through.
Why are you looking at me?
When I start judging them or being angry with them, and I can miss it so often. Oftentimes it's because I'm actually like longing for something. Maybe that they have, or feeling sorry for myself that my life is harder. Or so those are kind of the 2 cues for me that I need to do the internal, God, what is this about? What am I actually disappointed about? And I think just over the last, I don't know, I guess it's 8 years, but just having kind of hard thing after hard thing after hard thing, I've had to do just the deeper work of like, it's that constant work of when complaining starts to come up, peeling back the layers. What is this about? What am I not actually accepting about the realities of our life? Who am I comparing myself to that I think I should get to do those things, or life should be easier? And I feel like it's the masterful work of the enemy, especially for parents, because it comes so subtle. It's so like, we don't even realize that we're doing it. So we can't even always cut it off at the pass and recognize what it is. But I think I know every time it reveals something deeper. And I think if we can, rather than just judge ourselves and shame ourselves, I shouldn't complain, I should be grateful, other people have it worse. None of that is actually helpful at getting to the root of the problem. All those things are true, and we do need to have that helps our perspective. It could always be worse. That's true. But if we don't allow ourselves to actually do what you said, Mom, like, God, what are you trying to show me? What's this about? Where am I misaligned with what you have for me? And even just a prayer that's has been helpful to me even in the last couple of weeks is just asking God, will you show me what you're trying to teach me by the fact that this is so hard? And there are times, I think, to those of you listening who, if you're going through something that is not just perspective, it is legitimately so hard. And it's harder than most of the people whose lives are around yours. There have been times when I've had to go off of social media, mainly because I was having such a hard time with people complaining about their first world problems. And my reaction to that was just to judge them and be angry. And really it was because I was wrestling a lot in my own soul, and it wasn't helpful for me to hear about the perspective problems that people had. I couldn't do it without it turning to sin, without it turning to judgment. And those are some times when sometimes we have to not close in, but we need to make our circle a little bit smaller, and we need to let some people in. It feels impossible to be grateful right now.
Sure.
I think God likes it when we come to him and say stuff like that and just say, God, I know we're supposed to like rejoice in trials and suffering. I'm not rejoicing. I'm not grateful. Like, would you show me something in this to be grateful about?
And then even, don't you think that he often shows you that the grumbling is coming from a place of fear or a place of shame? Or
often it's fear that this is going to go on forever. And for me, a gratitude that is always easy to latch on to when you can't authentically say you're grateful for your really tough situation. I can always latch on to, I'm grateful for who God is in the midst of hard things. That's something I can always be grateful for. And so even just looking for those, like, if you can't be grateful for the whole thing, which is just the reality of a lot of where we're at sometimes, what are the little things you can be grateful for? And talk to God about the things that you're not grateful for, that you're wrestling with. I think there's just a lot of freedom. We talk about this all the time in naming things, not for naming them sake, so you get stuck there and all you do is talk about the emotion and the hard thing. We name it because there's freedom on the other side of that. Because when we're willing to name it, we don't stay stuck in it. And I think so often complaining is just that we're stuck in things we haven't named. You know? I know we were talking a little bit, Dad, before we recorded, of some of your complaining about the weather is because you grew up in the Bay Area with beautiful weather all the time. It was one of the best seasons of your life. You got to be a part of a massive move of God, saved out of the Jesus movement. Like, and not only that, even before you were saved, all your rock band years, all the like glory days, so to speak.
Growing up was just full of just great memories.
So for you, the weather signifies something bigger than just the fact that it's raining. It signifies the end of an era that you loved.
That's true.
And so I think that's with it. Like, if we can name it and get curious and bring it to God and say, God, what is it? It's the weather, but what is underneath the weather? You know? Then we can actually get somewhere beyond behavior modification. Because for the mom of young children who's exhausted, looking out the window, lonely, like you said, just telling yourself, I shouldn't feel this way. My kids should satisfy me, which P.S. they won't. Like, I should be happy. This is what I said I always wanted. That doesn't help you.
Doesn't make
actually complain less on the inside. Maybe you won't complain out loud as much to your kids. But it's not actually going to bring like a peace and a satisfaction to your heart.
We have a new offering for you. If you would like to receive daily or weekly text messages and encouragement around parenting, marriage, with prayers and scriptures, click the link in the show notes and we would love to send those to you. Can't wait to connect more with you.
You know, she said one thing that she just kind of in passing, because she says a lot of great stuff. She said, when I'm really suffering, I have to get off of social media, see people whining about first world problems.
Yeah, I want to mention that. Yeah.
Oh, you're going to mention that.
Well,
I think that's worth mentioning because
I
I
was
just
gonna
taught
say
Scarlett
that
what that meant.
suffering in our perspective, meaning that let's just define this really quick, meaning that you're not actually suffering truly in some of the main ways, like you have house, clothing, food, job, family that loves you, could think
leisure time,
too much
leisure time.
Mhm.
Most people that I know that have all of those things suffer often in their perspective, and you suffer in your perspective and that comes from a place of deep entitlement.
Mhm.
That is this entitlement that I should have it even better than I do. Now, we all have that as a potential temptation. So I'm not saying to those who feel the load, like it feels heavy, and it is heavy. What's really crazy to me, in my personal opinion, when I watch people suffer in their perspective, is it feels just as heavy to them as somebody who just lost a child.
Mhm.
But the truth is, if they actually step back a little bit, there's actually, it is a different thing. There's just categorically a different thing. So I think perspective is the real key word here for all of us, whether you are a mom, whether it's weather, or whether you've lost a child, all the extremes in between. It is, what is our perspective? And I think the entitlement, and we don't like that word, but the truth is we have so many good things. I think about so many people that are in poverty and are so happy.
Yeah.
Why is
Yeah.
that?
Mhm.
Well, we know why. We know because they're grateful for every little thing that comes in front of them. They don't feel
True
owed
joy.
for one thing.
Yeah.
Thank you, God, for this roof. Thank you for this meal. There's like what they feel is sincere, deep gratitude for just the smallest things. And we get mad when our house isn't done in time, when we're building a custom home. We're not building a custom home, but I mean, like that idea, right? Like our custom home is going to be another month. We have to live in this other Airbnb. Can you afford everything? Yeah. It's so funny how, oh, my vacation home that I always go to in Maui, it's going to be under construction. Oh, I'm so bummed. Like you think about that, right? And you go, man, like I get it. That's kind of annoying, but I don't think it's more than annoying. I don't know if it's more than that. So anyway, I'm just saying all that because I find this very frustrating sometimes when I see that, and I'm like, how do we interact with that in a healthy way? What were you gonna say?
Well, I'm just thinking I think that's one of the treasures that comes out of enduring deep suffering is there's
Perspective.
a joy.
Yeah.
There's a joy, like thinking of the people you're describing who you're just grateful to have a roof over their head and a bowl of rice, it's because they've experienced going without. It's because they've suffered. And I think that has been one of the great gifts that's come out of the last 8 years. I don't want to relive the last 8 years, but I was not a very grateful person before. I suffered in my perspective a lot. I still do.
Sure,
we all do.
Sure.
But I get to experience such a deeper joy now because of all the years of hard. And I just think it's just God. I just almost feel like you can like see God smiling of like, this is the joy I wanted you to experience all along.
Well, it's an accumulation of stuff and wealth, and especially in our culture and our time, especially on the West Coast, East Coast. I mean, most people listening to this, we all have the privilege, most of us, to be able to sit down and have time to listen to a podcast, right? There's so many parts of the world we just don't even have that. And you go to these different places, not just parts of the world, but different people in different situations, and you go, oh my goodness, I need some positive negative development in my life. There's all these positive things that you can learn from in your development, but I think most of us learn best through negative development. The things that don't go right, the hardships. I know the best things I've learned in leadership is when leadership situations that I was in either went bad or they handled it in a way that I never want to experience it. And so we actually learn from the negative. And so similarly, I just think so much of this perspective that God wants to give us, and God shapes our perspective. There's so much that the scriptures talk about when it comes to our perspective. Even just thinking about numbering your days, thinking about all the Psalms that talk about just like, teach me to number my days. Because what does that do? It helps you just go, oh, this is only one moment. This is only one side. This is this side of heaven. There's so much more. And for that longing that you feel entitled to, place that, like, really what that is God, I believe, drawing us to him and drawing us to the greater thing that he's calling us to, which is time with him for eternity. So anyway, yes, wherever you're at, please be encouraged that complaining will kill you.
Yeah, there you go.
It will kill you. But Diane, you have a verse. Let's share a verse. We'll wrap up. If you're enjoying this content and you want to go deeper, we have an amazing resource that we want to tell you about. It's the Intentional film series, Raising Passionate Jesus Followers. Now, this is an incredible tool for you for spiritual formation in the family. And we created this film series to help parents in their God-given task to raise and disciple their own children. Now, our hope is that we're able to help you and give you some of the tools that I know we so desperately need as we're in the process of raising our kids, and Phil and Diane have actually raised their kids. This is a 9-session film series on the process of what raising a passionate Jesus follower actually looks like. There's some workable solutions in here. There's a bunch of wisdom from the scriptures, and there's a bunch of practical help in your journey as you are raising your children. We cover all sorts of things like parental roles, goals versus values. What is discipline versus punishment? How do I create a heart of obedience in my child where they actually want to obey? What does a heart of self-control look like? Or how do I even help my child in the process of character development? We cover that and so many more things. You can use this film series in a variety of ways. You can use it at your home, preferably with your spouse if that's applicable, with a group of friends or in your community, or even through your local church. All you need to do is head over to our website, intentionalparents.org, click on film series, and then follow the prompts. We have a bunch of other resources there that you can check out, but we do pray that this blesses you in your pursuit of raising passionate Jesus followers.
It just made me think of 1 Peter, which is a book about suffering.
Yeah.
And it's a book about suffering, how to suffer even in your relationships. So it's a kind of a specific kind of suffering. And these people were exiled because of what they believed. So they had to leave their home, their community, their jobs, and they were sprinkled all over. You know, they called it, what is it, the Great Dispersion, right? In early Christianity, just where God actually had a reason for it. He was trying to get the people to go beyond the borders of Israel because it was time to share this gospel with the whole world, with the Gentile world in specific. And so they were refugees, and it was hard. And I just love some of what's said about it. In all this, he's talking to these people, you greatly rejoice. So somehow they were having a really good perspective. They had been clued in somehow that they were greatly rejoicing. Though now for a little while, you may have had to suffer grief in all kinds of trials. And, and just put yourself, because the people we're really talking to are parents.
Yeah.
And it does seem like there are seasons of some grief in all kinds of trials. Like it's way harder
it's real.
than the Mother's Day cards make it look, right? These have come, he's saying, Peter is saying, and remember way back when he kind of came off as a young man as kind of entitled, like, I'm going to tell you how things are going to go. This is the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
So as an older man, many of these various trials or all kinds of trials kind of smoothed around the edges, and he became this mature man of perspective. He says, these have come so that the proven genuineness of your faith, of greater worth than gold, which perishes, even though refined by fire, may result in praise, glory, and honor when Jesus Christ is revealed. So something about the way that they were suffering and the way Peter had suffered gave him this perspective that actually when Jesus is revealed, people are going to say, oh, I see why and how Peter changed that way. And then he talks about, now you believe in him and are filled with an inexpressible and glorious joy, for you are receiving the end result of your faith, the salvation of your souls. And then he also talks a lot about endurance. And I think especially in the early years of motherhood, one of the things that God's wants to do in our lives is make us really strong people with
Mm.
endurance, the
That's
kind of
good.
endurance that is marathon length endurance, not
Mhm.
just I can push through for a day or two.
Yeah.
Mm.
And I think if we realize God's doing that because he wants to refine us and he wants to use us in great ways and he wants to deepen us and
Mm.
deepen our dependence on him. I
Mm.
remember even just with my first child, before he was born, I thought, I am a really patient person.
Yeah.
I'm just, I'm not like my mom. I'm patient.
Mm.
And then I have this baby who demands everything from me 24/7, right?
Yes.
Mm.
And realizing, oh, I'm not.
No.
I'm not a patient person.
Welcome to the club.
Mm.
Yeah.
Oh, well, wherever you're at today, I think this is important. This conversation is more of an encouragement to remember that you are, that you're validated in the sense that you have feelings and emotions and things that come up. Things are hard. And I think there's all kinds of hard. And the temptation for all of us is to complain, to sit in it, to sulk in it. But the reality is God just invites us, like you said so many times, to heal our perspective. And I think for many, it's not even always that the circumstances can or will change, but I think that God really wants to change our perspective of the circumstance. And I think about that. I'm so grateful for the different moments that God's given me, like a little window into that for my own life of like, the stuff's not going to change, but how you see the stuff needs to change, and I can heal that.
Mm.
And what a gift it is for us, because what that is it's forming you to be a deeper, fuller person. So that is the
Right.
part, like the pain that you're experiencing. These are all beautiful gifts that God uses to form and shape us. And so
Mm.
wherever you're at today, when you're tempted to complain, when you're tempted to just be like, I'm so done, invite the Holy Spirit to ask how he wants to shape you and enjoy the journey. Thank you for listening.